Brother Nasr, assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a bit late tonight, but we can still have a conversation.
Yes. It's my pleasure.
Tell me how you made your journey to Islam.
My journey to Islam, I guess the start of my journey is my upbringing, I guess, and my religious upbringing. So my parents divorced at quite a young age. My mother was and still is Christian. My father is quite a non-religious and has always been like that, or maybe religious in his own way, perhaps. So when I was younger, we used to attend the church. Our mother used to bring us to the church, and we used to go every Sunday, as is the usual way, Sunday morning. And I used to not enjoy going to the church so much. Maybe some of it was fun. Yeah, they had the Sunday school, which I used to go to, and we used to do some activities. So it was partly fun, I guess.
Where was that? In Wales?
That was in Cardiff. Yeah, my hometown. Yeah. So so I used to attend the church, but despite my mother being, I guess I was a Christian at the time, I guess, but I didn't really feel so connected to it, really. And I used to be quite bored. I did used to sing the songs in the church. That was quite fun. When I got a bit older, I didn't really enjoy it at any point. I never quite, never quite felt a connection with it, really. So when I was a bit older, when I got to about 13, then my mother said that you don't have to go to church anymore. So,
really?
Yes.
Why? She gave you a break.
Not sure. She gave us the freedom. Yeah, exactly. She gave us the break. Yeah, and she would always used to take us to church, but she wasn't the most fervent. She wouldn't always stress the importance of things so much.
Maybe she lost enthusiasm herself.
Perhaps because she, I believe she did stop attending herself for a while. Not at that time, but at a later stage. But I don't want to go too much into personal details. So as soon as my mother said that you don't have to go anymore, I said, I was like, yay. I was very happy with that. So at that point, I stopped attending, and for a while that was the end of the, I guess, religious experience for me. And after that, I would just say that I wouldn't put myself in any particular category, atheist, agnostic. I was just like I think most people are. I just didn't really think about religion. Except for, and my father was always quite slightly critical of religion, not so much. He wasn't fanatic or anything like that. But as well, it's funny because around that same time, around 13 years of age, I started to go to high school, and my father, he was quite enthusiastic about getting us into a good high school. So the good high school at that time, well, there was a few, every city has the good schools and the bad schools. At that time, there was a school which was popularly known as the bad school. But behind the scenes, they'd be making a lot of improvements. And so my father realized this. And a few years later, everyone kind of caught wind and realized that this school was now a great school. But I think my father realized ahead of the trend. So he put us into this school, which was known as the bad school, but in reality, it was an improvement school. And that was one of the best schools, which is my school, Fitzallen High School. And that school had a very large number of what we call black and minority ethnic students, and a lot of Muslim students in that. And it was well known for that. It used to be, that school was, I guess, the butt of many jokes when we were growing up. Not very particularly correct jokes. So at around the same time when I stopped going to church was the time that I started to go to that high school. And I guess in primary school, the time when I grew up was, I kind of got to the age that I am. I was born in 1998. I got to see, I think, the tail end of really religion as a pillar of British or maybe Western society.
Well, the recent census,
yes,
most people said they did not identify with Christianity.
Okay, most people, yeah.
Well, less than 40% identified with Christianity.
Wow.
Imagine.
It's a big change.
Yeah.
Because that is kind of how it used to be. And I guess the people have always been on a kind of a decline for a long time, the church. But when I was growing up, I just about old enough to remember when in school we had kind of religious teachings, and we used to sing Christian songs, and we used to learn about Bible stories. Whereas now, I think maybe if I was 2, 3, 4 years younger, I don't think I would have seen any of that, because now the way that the schools are, they are kind of entirely secular, and it didn't used to be like that, and it is quite sad in a way that element is kind of totally gone, and religion has become something which is very taboo a lot of the time. So I did have that kind of residual religiosity growing up, I guess, and that was kind of part of my experience growing up. And then by the time I got to high school, that was kind of gone. So they didn't really have religion was not kind of a part of education, of the education system, or wider culture in general. The culture had very much become, by that point, it was always tending towards, but it became by that point very secular culture. However, the school that I went to, it had a lot of religious students, a lot of Muslim students, maybe some other religions as well. The majority of students, I believe, were and still are Muslim in the school.
And was that the first time you had exposure to Islam?
That was I can't really think of anything before that. So I'd heard about Islam, maybe not the best things that you hear in the media. In terms of actually meeting Muslims, then I'm not sure. Maybe I'd met 1 or 2, but nothing, I guess, really. If you meet 1 or 2 people, most of the time it's not really going to stand out. And I guess people are not really interested so much in finding out about religion, and especially when you're a child, if you're in school, if there is 1 or 2 Muslim children, they're not going to talk about the religion.
Yeah, true. Talk about football or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if they might not even want to. They probably prefer to talk about I don't know, Messi and Ronaldo. Even if they did want to talk about their religion, then especially back in these days, in the kind of 2000s, then they would probably feel shy of doing so in the first place. So I never really had any conscious engagement with Islam and Muslims up to that point when I began high school, I guess.
So what was the decisive moment?
The decisive moment, it's funny because kind of my journey to Islam was very gradual, I would say. Well, not necessarily gradual, but it took a long time. So I started at this high school, and I didn't have any friends at this high school, pretty much, maybe just a handful. Because like I mentioned, my father deliberately put me in a high school which was improving. So I didn't go to the same high school that most of my friends went to. Even if I did, then my friends from primary school, I'd only known them for 2 years, because after year 4, I moved to another primary school. So I was always kind of moving here and there a little bit. So when I went to high school, I didn't really have any friends, just a couple. So, what you do, I guess, when you go to an unfamiliar place, you stick to the familiar people. So I'd gone to, a lot of schools with a lot of British children. Not British, I mean, Welsh children. So that was kind of what I knew, and that was kind of what I stuck with. So, I used to speak to everyone, but I would mostly hang around with, people from, my specific culture, I guess, with my cultural experience. But at the same time, I used to speak to everyone. So, but however, most of the people were Muslim. So I got to see things that I hadn't seen before. Not that I'd never seen a Muslim before, but, it's, I guess, there was just some things I was not familiar with. I wasn't used to seeing, for example, the hijab and the covering before. I guess I hadn't really seen it. Of course you've seen it, but not too much. And maybe you have some questions and you don't really wonder.
Also, you were maturing.
Of course, yes. I was maturing, yes. Although I'm not sure how quickly, because I feel like I'm not sure. I feel like a lot of the time, I feel like there is a missing element of maturity, maybe, in a lot of the world today. I feel like it's something that's kind of gone away a little bit. Not to go into another topic, but so I feel like, of course, you are maturing, but not necessarily so much. Not having so many changes.
What I mean, maturing in terms of recognizing
Oh, yes.
things.
Yes.
I mean, at a younger age,
Yes.
we see things, but we don't pause.
Yes, that's true.
We just move on. Whereas as we mature, you start asking questions.
Yes.
Why certain people look in this way or behave in this way.
That's true, but that is what I didn't do for a while. So towards the end of my time in high school, that's when I started to actually kind of do that. Or I guess no, like I say, it was a gradual process. So, you know, when I entered the high school, I saw things I noticed was, you know, people would say "Wallahi," which I never heard before.
Wallahi,
yeah,
Somalis in particular,
of
right?
course, yeah, of course, yeah.
Wallahi,
that's right. So you would hear that, and when you hear things like that, if you never heard it before, then and you notice that, you know, half people, if not most people, are saying that. If it's something you never heard before, then it can be something which can be the way that you take it could be quite. You might say to yourself, "Well, I don't really understand this. Never heard this before, so I feel a little bit excluded. So I'm not gonna hang out with these people too much. You know, I'll work with them and I'll speak to them, but you know, I don't really understand kind of their way of doing things. I know my way of doing things, and there's some people here who do the things the same way. So I'll stick to them." So that's kind of what it was like, I guess. But some of the things that I noticed, especially one of the first things I remember noticing was the hijab, basically. And so this high school, like I say, was majority Muslim, but not all of the students were Muslim. There's a lot of non-Muslim students. So you had a lot of the Muslim girls, you know, they would wear hijab. Of course, to varying degrees. Some of them were not with a hijab, of course. And the non-Muslim girls, likewise, to varying degrees. Some of them would be more modest and some of them would be less modest. That's just how people are, you know. But what I noticed when I was maybe after 1 or 2 or 3 years in high school, I kind of said to myself, and I just, you know, been around and just spent some time in that environment, I said to myself that I noticed it's very strange that the girls who covered themselves, I found them to be more beautiful than the girls who didn't, which you would maybe think would be the other way around, right? So
no, it imparts beauty. Hijab imparts beauty, really.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because
modesty is beauty in itself.
It goes a long way, definitely. And definitely it was that modesty, I guess, that kind of I kind of noticed. And you know, the first thing, if you're not used to seeing the hijab, the first thing you'll think is this is strange, and you know, this is a bit. You kind of just don't understand it, and you might feel a bit weird about it, maybe, and you're just not used to it, and you just kind of think, okay, you kind of just don't relate to the person so much when you see them doing something which you're not used to. You see a girl wearing hijab, you just don't relate to them so much. But spending time in that environment, I guess, spending time around the Muslims, and not just the Muslims, but just people from different cultures. And I think spending time around people of different cultures is one of the most helpful things a person can do to develop their outlook, to develop as a person. I think it's extremely important. And I won't go on too much of a tangent, but you often hear that a lot of the people who are radical in one way or another, whether it's you know, radical right wing, or maybe radical you know, terrorism from any aspect, a lot of the time you find out, or just radical views about other ethnicities, a lot of the time you find out that even the person who's the most radical, when they actually spent time with people who were from the cultures which they thought they hated and actually got to know them, they found out that they didn't hate them.
True.
This is you hear this story time and time again, and I've heard this from, not personally, but I've read this from someone who works in the field of someone who used to be, you know, a right-wing extremist himself, and now they became de-radicalized, and now they help to de-radicalize others. That's what they say. They say one of the most helpful things, if not the only thing that works sometimes, is just having people spend time around those people who are otherwise they're the other, the unknown. You know, and what do they say? That which you don't know, you'll fear, right?
True.
So I think that's, you know, it's something which can help a person a lot to kind of develop their worldview and to break down their prejudices. Yeah, that's the main thing that it does, I guess, to spend time around other people who you're not familiar with. not necessarily going out of your way to do it, but I guess in the workplace or in education or things like that, you know. So yeah, so spending time around people outside of my culture, around the Muslims, I started to, you know, relate more to the people and realize that, you know, these people who they don't look so much like me, and they don't speak the same way I do, or they don't wear the same clothes that I do. You know, at the end of the day, humans are very similar, regardless of where they're from. And, you know, they all have, and kind of noticed that more and more. Of course, you know these things, but you don't really pay attention to them. That all of these people from all of these different communities, they all have their own hopes and dreams. They all have their own things which they like, things which they don't like. They all have their own, you know, family who they love. They all have their own goals and ambitions. And it's not that you don't know that before, but it's more that you just don't really feel it. And you don't relate to these people. When you spend more time around them, then you will find that you will relate to these people, and you'll start to see them, you know, not, you won't start to kind of see them as just being totally foreign to you. You'll see them as someone who's, you know, in the same arena as you.
Well, that's the humanity, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
We all meet within the house of humanity.
Yes. But it can be very, you know, you might not necessarily realize that, especially if you're in a very kind of, and I think maybe the parents could have a role in this. I think if someone is raising a child, then they should try their best not to, you know, restrict their child to necessarily, I guess, friendships and acquaintances of the same ethnicity, for example. I think just that will help a lot. Someone should kind of, you know, try their best to kind of expose their child to different ethnicities maybe, or different cultures, or just tell their child about the world and not just give them, you know, a very one-dimensional view. So when I started to relate more to the Muslims, I guess, I became a bit more relaxed around them. And like I say, I started to realize that the Muslim girls in particular, they were very, especially perhaps because of the hijab and the modesty that they had, it made them very
attractive.
Yes, in a different way, kind of.
You befriended any of them?
The kind of the Muslims in general, I would start to get more, befriend them more and more. And I just used to speak to everyone, you know, just kind of joke with everyone. And like I say, it was a long process of just, you know, becoming more and more familiar, maybe, and at the same time finding out more and more who I was, because I think that's a problem a lot of people have nowadays, that they don't really know who they are. They've never really stopped to reflect and think, okay, who am I? You know, who am I? Not who does anyone want me to be? Who am I? What do I like? What are my goals? What are my dreams? I think a lot of us nowadays, we don't really ever stop to think about that, which is, you know, it's not really, it's healthy for a person to do that, to get to know who am I, because, you know, we believe in Islam that we're not all created the exact same way. People have different, you know, different natures and different characteristics and different, you know, and Islam doesn't require us to be all exactly the same person.
True. To the contrary, it requires of us to recognize that we are different.
Exactly. And to, you know, take advantage of those differences. And if someone is good at something, then he or she can do that thing.
So what then brought you into...
I don't know. I would say that, so throughout all of this time, I wasn't necessarily religious or irreligious. Like I say, like most people, I think I just didn't think about it. I think you'll find that this is most people. They just, and a lot of the people who are religious as well, a lot of the Muslims, especially the young Muslims in high school or other religions, you'll find that they might have a religion, but they don't really think about religion too much. They don't really engage with it. They don't critically think about it. It's not kind of something that's influences them that much.
Well, for many Muslims who are born into Islam, it's a culture for them.
Exactly. And it's easy to take it for granted, I think.
Sure.
And we talk a lot about people who Allah has guided to Islam and they become a Muslim. At the same time, even people who are born, like you mentioned, into Muslim families and Muslim cultures, a lot of people go through the same process of actually finding themselves and thinking critically about religion and thinking, you know, why am I Muslim? What does it mean? Is this something that's just I've been born into, or is this something that I want to actually carry on with? And maybe some people haven't had that moment of realization. So yeah, like I say, most people, they think that they don't really think about religion, especially nowadays. It didn't used to be like this. A lot of people are quite apprehensive of talking about religion in the first place. It's not a popular topic, especially amongst maybe the majority of the people in the West. It's not something they really feel comfortable with talking about. They don't really like it to be mentioned. Not everyone, of course, but I feel like maybe it's been that way for a long time, more and more, but especially nowadays. And that's kind of what I used to be like. I didn't really used to think about, spiritualism. I think everyone has these reflections and everyone has these moments which make them think about it. But because that's part of, as humans, we have these moments and we wonder these things sometimes from time to time. But, a lot of the time we just forget about it rather than actually continuing to think about it. I guess being around Muslims for so long, and just meeting so many different people and realizing that, and this is a key thing that a lot of people realize, even a lot of people who don't become Muslim or haven't become Muslim, they will tell you the same thing. When they spend time around, lots of Muslims or just any group, they will say that I realized over time that these people are just people like me and you. There's no difference. They have differences between them. We have, basically people say that, maybe this was my experience to a degree. They say that I thought of these people as just one monolithic group, just one group of people, all the same. They all do their things. But then when I actually got to know them, this is what people say and what I would say. You realize that it's not like that. People are all different. Just like that your own people are different, you realize that all people are different. And you can't just paint everyone with the same brush. So I did eventually become, somewhat curious as to, and I guess I started to make more Muslim friends as well. And I just became curious. And I just started to read a little bit about Islam. But this was after many years, after 5-6 years.
And that was still at high school?
That was towards the end of my time at high school. So, and no one actually, people often ask the question, so who kind of, they say, who gave you da'wah? they wondering, who was the person who encouraged you to become a Muslim? And I always say, well, no one really. It was just kind of...
You just were motivated because of curiosity.
That's right, yeah. Definitely curiosity. And as well, not just curiosity, but also just the things that I'd seen from the Muslims which impressed me and that I hadn't seen in other communities. In terms of, and now this is talking about when I was in high school. And as a disclaimer, when you're in high school, a lot of people, they're not really kind of mature so much, and they don't really act so much according to their values. In high school, people just kind of, no one's really focused. Maybe at the same university, maybe after university, people wake up a little bit. So, but even during that stage in high school, when people are not necessarily the most religious they will be in their life, I still notice differences. From the Muslims, I noticed some of the differences. For example, that one of the differences I noticed was a sense of brotherhood. And it's not necessarily that they told me that this is there, I just noticed it. It's kind of just... You
felt it?
Exactly, unspoken rules. For example, things like they'll be willing to help each other, they'll be generous towards one another, they want good for one another, which I think some of the cultures, and religions other than Islam, maybe they don't have that to such a degree. It almost seems like even if someone is not a very practicing Muslim, or even if they're not a very well-behaved student, they will still have this kind of innate sincerity for their brothers and sisters. They want good for them. They have a certain degree of pride for their religion. As well, they will want to communicate their religion to you. So some people may be religious and you will talk to them about religion. But a lot of the time they will say, you'll finish the conversation and they'll be like, yeah, that's my religion. And they don't really want to invite you towards it. And you don't really feel that they want you to invite towards it. You don't really feel that they're passionate about you kind of joining their religion. Whereas
they don't want to be seen to compel you. Maybe that's
perhaps some people, but other people, they don't, you kind of sense that they don't even necessarily want you to join their religion.
Yeah.
In the first place. This is my religion, and that's what I do, and that's kind of the end of the conversation. Whereas with the Muslims, even some of the misbehaved Muslims, I remember there was one boy, he was quite misbehaved, and I used to know him quite well. But even though he was, a little bit of a class clown, and he wasn't performing that well academically either, but at the same time, he used to say, or he would say from time to time, why don't you take a leaflet and learn about Islam? And they would kind of talk about their religion a bit. So even this person who's not really the most practicing, he will still say, they're quite eager, and you can tell that they actually, even if they're not someone who literally says to themselves, I want to make people become Muslim. They just have that naturally innate that this religion is not something that's just theirs. For me,
true.
They want to, even if they don't do it actively, they would like you to enter their religion and to learn more about it. It's not kind of withholding. So
actually, all these observations were the ones that attracted you.
Definitely.
And made you interested in knowing more.
Definitely, yes. The interactions that, and I hear this from a lot of people, that just the interactions that they notice from the Muslims around them, let alone, like I mentioned, I was in high school, and people in high school, they're not really, they just mess around. People are not really serious in high school. But I still noticed, even in that place. Whereas with adults, you'll probably be likely to notice even more.
And how long did this take, this process?
It took many years, so it's a long process. So maybe started when I was about 11, and I became Muslim when I was about 17. Or I think when I was 17. So
already in university or not yet?
No, in fact, in my last year of A-levels. Yeah, so I just became curious, and this is one of the hardest parts, I think, about if you wanted someone to become Muslim. The hardest part is giving them that spark of curiosity. If they have that, then that can take them a long way.
Yeah.
And like I say, just kind of having them critically thinking about spirituality, about religion. I've heard a lot of people talk about how they became Muslim, and they say that I just felt like I needed, I just sensed that I needed to worship the higher power. So they say I looked at the different religions, and I tried this one out, I tried that one out, I had a look at this, and the only thing that really stuck was Islam. I've heard this many times.
Yes.
I've seen this online, and I've heard this.
I heard it too.
Yeah.
Well, in your case, it was nothing like this.
No, in my case, it was
You were just observing
the
Muslims, and you were becoming more increasingly curious about their religion.
That's right, yeah.
We need to continue the discussion, but in part 2, because the time for this episode has ended. So we'll resume in the next part, inshallah.
Brilliant, inshallah.